So that's elegant simplicity. In fact, we differentiate in our book, we talk about two kinds of simplicity. There's simplistic and there's elegant simplicity. The idea that comes to your mind first is simplistic. And then you go through complexity. You iterate through complexity, through rapid prototyping. And then there is a simplicity that emerges on the other side of complexity. That's elegant simplicity. But you have to version to get to it. And if you are able to get to that, that's where, that's the idea that will succeed in the market. The next one, which was very interesting, something that we spotted in most success stories that we have in the book, is pace to critical mass. Sometimes you find there are great ideas that don't succeed. There are good ideas that succeed, but great ideas that don't succeed. What's the difference? And then we found our answer in this interesting theory in innovation called the theory of innovation diffusion that actually looks at the human evolution and all the great concepts and ideas that have changed mankind. And you see why some ideas succeed and others don't. The successful ideas are able to hit the critical mass in their industry at a certain pace that creates a wave which becomes a storm. What is this pace? The question is, what's critical mass in your industry? Is it 20%? See, in order to change the whole ecosystem, you don't have to change the whole ecosystem. In order to become successful, you don't have to, 100% consumers don't need to buy your offering. Even if 20% people buy your offering and start engaging with you with an intensity, you will start a wave that will become a storm. So what is the critical mass in your industry? Is it 20%? Is it 10%? Is it 5% highly engaged consumers who will use your product in spite of you, in spite of the bugs, and who will allow you to iterate it to elegance? So our whole thing was there are certain ideas that actually can generate a pace to critical mass. So the question we ask is, what is your first unlock? A lot of times your first unlock or your critical mass also comes from a target segment that might not be a primary target audience. A couple of interesting examples in the book. Make My Trip, for example. Deep Kalra, the founder, he realized something very interesting. I mean, although he had a great idea about what he wanted to create when he started off, he wasn't getting the traction that he wanted. So obviously, he went through certain tough times where maybe a co-founder left and the site wasn't doing well, but he spotted something very interesting. An unusual happening when he looked at the data, that there was a segment that was engaging with the site, while others, India maybe wasn't ready because there were no devices, the bandwidth wasn't there, Indians were not ready to transact online. Maybe they didn't trust it. So he wasn't getting the critical mass. But he realized there was a small segment that was actually using the service, and it was the NRIs. But he had not built the product for people outside India, he built the product for Indians. He took a radical decision. He decided not to spend any money in India, in Indian markets. He focused on NRIs. NRIs kept using them, using the services, and that allowed him to iterate it to elegance. And by the time, so for the next 5 years, he built the product, tweaked it, made it better, and by that time, India was ready for Make My Trip, and then he came back and relaunched it. So you see, your critical mass might come from a segment that's not your primary target audience. Fiamma DeWills is another story, where they built these gel bars, which were really targeted at the youth, young women. And they realized that the consumers who were using them were actually 45, 50-year-old women. And they were not their target audience at all. But they also realized that they were using them because they had suddenly become aware of their wrinkles, and they wanted something which wasn't soap, which was better than that. But anyone will tell you, but if that's not your target audience and that's not how you positioned your brand, then you shouldn't go after them. They decided to stay with those, so they allow you to iterate the brand and get it ready for the primary target audience. There are stories upon stories, you'll hear about them, and Anisha is going to tell you more about brand stories as we go along. Next, fresh, vibrant market. So once you created that, you touched the critical mass, you created that storm, suddenly you, the stormer, have created a set of fresh norms. And now, all those lazy, cynical incumbents who kept saying nothing can happen, nothing much can happen, we've tried everything, etc., no innovation can happen, are now suddenly catching up because they must in order to stay relevant. Otherwise, there's a risk of them becoming irrelevant in the market. But fresh norms at the end of the day are norms. And norms are just the lull before the next storm arrives. Because the stormer, the erstwhile stormer, has now become a normer. He's got normed. And the market is now ready for the next storm. And therefore maybe another outsider or an incumbent who turns rogue to come in and play the role of a stormer. Unless this ex-stormer can turn stormer again. So this whole process or method is what we call storm the norm method. We found a very interesting principle in economics that explains how these people are able to unlock new hidden value that incumbents can't see. And it's called total surplus. That's the basic economics. It's the sum of consumer surplus and producer surplus. Consumer surplus is the price that the consumer is willing to pay above the market equilibrium price. And producer surplus is price that the producer is willing to accept below the market equilibrium price. The sum is called total surplus. In these 20 stories, you'll see how these organizations that created a storm in their industry were the ones that unlocked hidden surplus that couldn't be seen. Take an example of PVR. In fact, we had an article 3 days ago in Business World on how PVR stormed the norms of the industry, how they, from single screens, which we call uniplexes, to multiplexes, how they unlocked new surplus. You know, it was a stale, stagnant market. Single screens weren't doing too much, no innovation happening, stale, literally stinky cinema halls where we would go, we would pay what, 30, 40 rupees those times. Now, you know, they didn't have enough money to experiment. And therefore, if there is very little experimentation, there is no innovation that happens. Consumers were not willing to pay more than 30, 40 rupees. They would say, you know, that's all the value that we're getting. Look at the money that the consumers are paying today. 150 rupees for a movie, 200, 300, even 1,000 rupees for gold class. Look at the new total surplus that has got unlocked. If you ask people today, you just paid whatever you did. For the next movie, how much are you willing to pay? You will say, okay, the next one I'll pay 150 rupees. And the movie comes, it's 100 rupees. So the consumer surplus is 50 rupees. Ask PVR, you just charge 100 rupees for the next movie. How much are you willing to accept below that market equilibrium price? They'll say 70 rupees, I still make profit. Look at the total surplus, 50 rupees plus 30, 80 rupees per consumer. If that kind of economic value comes in, that leads to a lot of experimentation, lot of innovation. You see, the whole industry is experimenting with genres, different kinds of movies, different kinds of direction, different kind of production formats and everything else. So it's suddenly a very vibrant market. So you see, it's a vibrant market, storm has happened, but this industry is ready for the next storm. Because the ex-stormers have got normed. OTT, over the top, Netflix is here. And if consumers are able to watch great quality movies wherever they are in the device of their choice, then out of 10, they're going to watch 8 movies on their device and 2 movies maybe in the cinema hall. You see, this industry is ready to lose at least 80% of their business. Unless they move it, because storm is brewing. So I know, time is up, it says. Okay, so let me just quickly close it. So the question is, for you, I'll connect it with the culture. If this is the kind of world we live in, where storms come unexpectedly, where you can't do 5-year planning anymore because you can't even predict what's going to happen the next year. If you have to be as nimble as you were when you were founder, now you have a larger team. How do you, as an organization, create a purpose that drives you, that mobilizes you, and as an organization, the whole is bigger than the sum of parts. You as an organization are so nimble, and everyone is galvanized around a common purpose, that you are able to anticipate what is coming, spot the suboptimal, and not wait for a stormer to come and then play catch up. You as a team, how do you play the role of a stormer? Because you don't know when the next stormer will come and make you irrelevant. I'll stop here. I had a few more slides, but I guess we are running late, so I'll just stop here. Thank you so much. And I think the time's right for Anisha Motwani to come and do her magic.